Well, let's return to the outcry from passengers as the new year brings new higher prices on the railways. The overall rise will outstrip the increase set by the government, leading unions to accuse private train companies of milking the system. Well, I'm joined from central London by Cat Hobbs, director of the campaign group We Own It. Thanks very much for joining us, Cat. So is this what's happening here? Is this private companies just trying to strip passengers for all that they've got?
I'm afraid I think that's exactly what's happening. What we're seeing is train fares are rising yet again above inflation and above wages. And passengers really can't deal with any more increases. So I think, really the privatised rail system isn't working here.
But isn't this all about a rebalancing, though, Kat? That at the moment, what we have is that the general taxpayer, who may or may not use the train system, is having to pay a lot more into the system to keep it going. And what the government is trying to do is shift that onto the people that actually use the service. So they are paying a greater proportion of it. That makes sense, surely.
Well, that's what the government is saying, but the truth is that the cost of running the railway has increased massively since privatisation, and that cost is being directly passed on to passengers. What we know is that railways in other countries, other European countries like France and Germany, are much, much cheaper. The overall system is cheaper, it's more efficient, and that means that passengers pay less. In this country, we're paying sometimes double the ticket prices of other European countries, precisely because our system is so inefficient.
But are you sympathetic to the point, though, that the rail delivery group and the government are making, that there has been systematic underinvestment in the railway network for years, and we're trying now to build that back up again? The rail delivery group saying 97% of every pound of what you pay for your ticket goes to improve services.
Well, exactly. So where does the other 3% go? That goes straight into shareholders' pockets. And that's not to mention all of the inefficiency and the wastefulness that happens because we have a fragmented train system. You don't know who's running your train versus who's running the track. It should all be in one system, run as a whole network. That would make a lot more sense. And what we know is that people think that privatisation has failed. 58% of people think it's failed. Only 1% of people think it's a complete success. And that just shows how passengers are so angry about this that they really need change to happen. I think it's very disingenuous of the government and the train companies to try to pretend that privatisation has worked when passengers are seeing overcrowded trains, high fares that just keep on increasing. It clearly isn't working.
And so would you like to see what Jeremy Corbyn is proposing, and that is just renationalisation of the entire system, so kind of the network as well as the operators?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. But we don't need to talk about renationalising. We can talk about the public ownership of the future actually being much better than what we've had in the past. But it should be run for passengers, not for profits. And that can be done just by bringing in train contracts as they come up for renewal.
But we remember, or some of us remember, the days of National Rail, and they were hardly the glory days of the railway network, were they?
Well, that's because at that time the government wasn't actually investing in the rail network as it needed to. But as I say, in the future, if we have the investment and it's not going into train company shareholder profits, but it's actually going back into the rail network, that could be a much better system.
So what are you calling for the government to do? I mean, obviously, they're not going to renationalise. So what would you like to see from the government now?
Well, the government is highly ideological about this. It's completely committed to the idea that private train companies are the right people to be running the railway. But actually, we know that there isn't really a market. You don't get any choice about what train you get on. So that doesn't really work. But they'll keep on treading that line. What we need to do is show that the public isn't supporting that. The public wants to see public ownership of the railways. And we need to show that that's practical because it's actually happened before. We've seen public ownership of the railways on the East Coast Line, and that worked really, really well.
Cat Hobbs, director of the campaign group We Own It, thank you very much indeed for joining us.